Hey guys, Dr. D here for another video on music production and music technology. Today we're going to be talking about MIDI effects in Logic Pro X. Okay, so MIDI effects, once again, are simply just effects that are used on MIDI, similar to audio effects like reverb, delay, compression, etc., etc. MIDI effects affect MIDI instruments and MIDI information specifically. So a couple basic things about MIDI. First of all, when you use a MIDI keyboard to play a software instrument, whenever you hit the note on the keyboard, it will start tracking that note and recording it. And then when you let go, it releases it. So it always tracks the duration, also the pitch, the highness and lowness of the note, the frequency, the pitch, musical note. And it also tracks the dynamics. Yeah, so in MIDI speak, velocity is the term for the dynamics. So however soft or loud you hit the note, certain instruments will respond with a different sound or a different effect on it. So that's known as velocity, and you can edit that stuff with the velocity stems you'll see in most DAWs. So today we're going to talk about all this stuff and explore the MIDI effects available in Logic Pro X. Okay, let's get to it. Boom. So I have several MIDI instruments loaded in different tracks here, as well as the MIDI effect. You'll find MIDI effects on the MIDI effect category on the channel strip. So if I create a new software instrument track and I'm looking at that channel strip, I have the actual software instrument right here, but right above that I have the MIDI effect. And that's where I can choose from any of these different MIDI effects. I'm going to cover most of these today. Okay, so we'll start with the most common one, the arpeggiator. So arpeggiators are used to sort of synthetically create a arpeggio, which is the notes of a chord but played broken up. So instead of playing all three notes of the chord to play a chord, I can play them one at a time, arpeggiating it. You can go down, up, from out to in. So the arpeggiator automatically does this for you in different rhythmic cycles. So if I load a arpeggiator effect in here, I have this MIDI effect, and I can go ahead and play a chord of some sort, which I already have tracked here. I'm going to loop this. Solo that. So you can hear my arpeggios happening. Okay, and it automatically reacts to the way at which I play these chords. I can change the rate, so if I want a slower rhythm, like eighth notes or 16th notes or quarter notes, I can have these different rhythmic subdivisions. I can also control basically the direction at which these chords and arpeggios go. So if it's 4 or 5 notes, it's going to go from high to low, or vice versa. You can go down and up, in and out, etc., etc. You can also have it reflect what your hand played. So for instance, when I use this, it's going to use the order at which I hit the keys to react to the direction of the arpeggio. I can add some variation in octave pitch ranges to this as well. If I want to get a higher range of pitches, it will perform variations of that. And I can also get into the details, into the weeds, and I can change some more aspects, like I can get in here and mess around with the velocity and the note length, and add swing to the arpeggios and make them sound a little bit more like a swung rhythm. All right, so that's the arpeggiator. Let's move on to the chord trigger. Chord trigger is another pretty useful tool when you want to play one note at a time and have it trigger an entire chord while you're doing it. So let's explore this one. So I've got I'm playing a middle C here. You're basically looking at two keyboards, one for the input, one for the output. So if I want to input with my C, my C2, I need to program this thing to play a chord whenever I hit this key on the keyboard. So the way I do that is I need to click on the Learn button. And, oopsie, let me clear that. I hit the Learn button, and I'm going to play the C or click on the C with the mouse, either way. Okay, so there's the note. And I want it to play about a power chord. So I'm going to start with the C, and then a fifth above that. And I'm going to turn off my Learn. And I have it on single mode, which means it's going to use that same chord pattern on every single other key in this range. So now I have my power chord there on C, power chord on E, so I can play Wild Thing or something. Okay, so all fits. I can adapt this and change this and make more complex chords, like major seventh chords maybe. If I go out of the range, nothing happens to me, so I have to change my triggered range if I have more keys on my keyboard. Okay, cool. So the multi-mode is where I can program different chords per note. So let's go back to C2 here, and I'm going to learn my C2, and I want to make this I'm going to make this like a second inversion chord. Okay, all right. Okay, so that's my C. Just my C note will yield that chord. All the other ones haven't done anything yet. So this D chord, or my D note, I want that to play some other crazy chord. How about a D minor 7? Okay, and then this next note here, this E, I'm going to do some kind of crazy other chord. How about an E diminished? Oops. Okay, so now I have 3 separate chords to these 3 keys on the keyboard. So you could do any chord progression and just have it assigned to these 3 different notes. So if you're not a keyboardist or you want someone to play a cool keyboard chord section to something that they don't know how to play keyboard, you could set this up and program this and just play these 3 chords, no matter how complex they are, with those 3 notes. Okay, cool. The chord tool. Chord Trigger. Moving on, the Modifier. The Modifier is basically, this is equivalent to what some other DAWs call MIDI mapping, where I can map a certain effect or a certain knob on my MIDI keyboard to an effect on a device anywhere. So I want to go ahead and show you some of this with the picture here. But I have my modifier open here. Let me get a fresh modifier so it doesn't have already things assigned to it. So grabbing my modifier. And what I wish to do with this is, if you can kind of see, I have a keyboard next to me. I got my MIDI controller here. And on my MIDI controller, I've got lots of knobs and faders and all that good stuff where I can assign these knobs to be various, to control various effects on devices and whatnot. So the way this one works is the input event. The input event's going to be which one of these controller knobs or switches that I choose to use, and then I can reassign that to control the parameter of some kind of device. So I'm on over here on my modifier. I have the ES2 as my instrument, as that synthesizer, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to map this fader to the drive knob so I could bring up some more distortion or something like that as I fade this up. So what I do is you can choose manually which param or which knob or controller knob or whatever fader, but I'm going to use Learn MIDI. This is way easier. So I click on the Learn MIDI, so basically whichever knob I touch, boom, it receives that and maps that, and then I can reassign that to any parameter on any other plugin or any device. So I'm going to learn plugin parameter, and with my mouse I'm going to click on drive. So that means whenever I turn my fader, you can see that it controls the drive. So as I hit play on my DAW here and play. Okay, so that could be anything, anywhere. Filter sweeps, like turning on, off arpeggiators, like anywhere you map one of these knobs to any parameter on any device anywhere, like there's, you know, limitless possibilities. So that's what we have going on with that modifiers. Basically allows you to map MIDI controller and assign knobs on your MIDI controller to different parameters. Okay, cool. Let's get back into more devices here. Moving on to the next one we have is the Modulator. This is a LFO, more or less. This is a way of, well, it's both an LFO and an envelope. So basically, we have an oscillating, we'll focus on the LFO first, an oscillating waveform. You can choose any type of oscillating waveform, and you have the rate at which it's oscillating, how fast or slow, and you can map this to a parameter on any other device. So currently it's already mapped to my drive, and you can see as I have this modulating LFO, it's controlling that automatically. And when I hit play, you can hear that. So let me just walk you through how we would do that. So I'm going to load in a fresh modulator, okay, from my Midi FX. I'm pulling the modulator. There goes the modulator. And I want to use a sine wave, and I'll mess with the rates and everything later. But what I need to do is assign it to a parameter. So let's see, I have the parameter off, so I can choose to learn the plugin parameter. Then I go over here and I pick whatever parameter on the plugin or device I want. How about we use cut this time? All right, so let's see what we get. I hit play, and I need to activate the LFO to actually do something. Ooh, now it's working. Okay, nice. So I can change the symmetry of the wave. I can change the type of wave, the frequency of it. This can also be set to be rhythmic. The offset. Okay, so you get the idea. A lot of musical stuff you can do with that, depending on where you map it. Let's look at the envelope. So envelope is a little bit trickier, but it's essentially the same thing. A sound envelope is like the attack, decay, sustain, and release of a note. All right. Some notes have, especially with synthesizers, there's not much going on for my attack and decay. Just a solid note that plays. So what I'd like to do is give a little bit of attack, or maybe take some of the attack off. So what I want to do is I want to map this to a certain effect parameter or device parameter. So it'd be nice if I could have a swelling effect like that with my cut. You know, like I hit the note, and it swells out like that. So it's kind of got this, you know, a swelling effect. So what I want to do is I want to map my envelope to the cut knob, and then there we go. Depending on where how I set my attack, decay, and release and hold, I can shape that note. Okay, so it's an automated envelope, and I can get in here and tweak all these other settings and parameters of this as well to tune it in and make some crazier sounds. But anyway, that is the modulator MIDI effect, more or less. Let's hop into the next one, note repeater. Okay, so note repeater is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to repeat notes. Let's look at that plugin here. This is kind of the same as or analogous to a delay. You hit one note and it echoes that note. I can change how loud the echo is, how long it keeps going for, how quickly it repeats, and it's usually in milliseconds or some kind of time subdivision. So what I have currently on this device, I have these, the repeats are going to be the amount of repetitions, how long it goes on. This one's got 21. It's a little bit much. Maybe just 5 or 10 is enough. And maybe I want to change the rate of delay to be eighth notes or something. So it sounds a lot like a delay. So if I play this loop down here, okay, so by messing with the amount of repeats and the velocity or the dynamic decay of those, or the increase of those repeats, or the subdivision of them, or the time increment milliseconds, I can add a delay note repeater kind of sound to the MIDI. All right, moving on. Transposer is very straightforward. Transposer just transposes. So if I have a riff here that's in the key of C minor and I want it to be in D minor, you can move it a whole step up, and this also affects real-time playing. So if you want to perform something in a different key in your keyboard skills, leave something to be desired, you can play in the key of C and just transpose up to F sharp or down to D flat or up to D flat or whatever you want, some weird key, as long as you know how many half steps away it is. And that can allow you to play in awkward keys, but without having to press all the awkward keyboard keys. All right, and then the last one, the velocity. The velocity is, of course, like the dynamic aspect of your instrument. Now, when you play certain keyboard instruments, they will react differently to how hard you hit. So one of the great examples is like a Fender Rhodes keyboard, or maybe a clavichord. Let me throw that on here. All right, so we've got this clavichord, and as I play quieter or louder, it gives me kind of a different tone. That can be problematic because maybe I want the very harsh tone, but I don't want to beat my keyboard up so much. So I can use the velocity MIDI effect to make all of my notes sound louder. So you can kind of see the range of dynamics from playing loud and hard to playing soft. And I want to ramp that up so that everything is loud. Or if I want everything to be much quieter, I can kind of change my curve here and get the softer tone. So it basically changes the dynamic range of the MIDI. Makeup is kind of like the output gain, more or less. And the threshold, I can, depending on where I'm at here, I can kind of make a more exaggerated difference between the low and high of my dynamic playing. some really quiet stuff, and then exaggerated loud stuff. So that's kind of interesting with your dynamic touch and exaggerating that or minimizing that. Okay. Well, guys, that has been this video on using MIDI effects in Logic Pro, and I hope you learned something, and now you can go on and have fun and make some music, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.